Hi everyone, thanks for listening to another episode of Dogman Encounters Radio. I'm Vic Cundiff and I'll be your host for the show. If you've had an encounter of your own and would like to speak with me whether in private or on the show, please go to dogmanencounters.com and submit a report. I'd love to hear from you. Tonight's guest is Tom. Tom, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Vic. Good evening to you.
Thanks for being here. Tom, please give us a brief bio on yourself.
Well, Vic, I'm married with 2 children. I served 4 years active duty in the Marine Corps, achieving the rank of sergeant. After my 4-year enlistment was over, I attended and graduated from the University of Mississippi in Oxford with a Bachelor of Arts degree in economics. I currently work in the litigation division of a medium-sized law firm located on the west coast of Florida.
Well, it sure sounds like you're a very well-rounded guy. And thanks for your service to our country, too.
Well, thank you, Vic. I appreciate that.
Oh, you're welcome. Tom, what kind of interest did you have in werewolves and things like that go bump in the night when you were growing up?
Frankly, not too much. Yes, I saw the occasional horror movie, but I was more interested in sports and girls, I guess, more so than supernatural or paranormal.
I can understand that. When you had your encounter, you were an active duty Marine. Please tell us what you did in the Marines.
Well, my MOS, or also known as the Military Occupational Specialty, was 2841, which was a radio repair technician. I went through a year of intensive schooling at the Marine Corps base in 29 Palms, California to learn that job. The MOS required I have a top secret clearance because I did work with cryptology gear and things of that nature.
I see. Before you had your encounter, had you heard of any other Marines having an encounter with what might have been a Dogman?
No, I did not.
Well, that's not all that surprising. Have you heard about any Marines having an encounter after you had yours?
Well, actually, since the advent of the internet, probably maybe going back 10 years, I had looked up incidents in Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, which was where my Dogman encounter occurred, and there was some mention of Sasquatch sightings there. So I don't recall anything about an actual Dogman sighting, but there is supposedly Sasquatch sightings in that county, which is Onslow County, and perhaps even on the Marine Corps base.
Yeah, I think I've heard about other Dogman encounters happening in that area too. At the time of your encounter, you had a top secret clearance like you just mentioned. How did that complicate matters for you after you saw what you saw that night?
Well, even though I was close to the expiration of my active duty, it was probably 4 months before I was actually scheduled to be discharged. It's not something you would tell your commanding officer or any superiors because certainly you don't want to have them pull your clearance. And I had also thought about perhaps going back into the military as an officer after I completed my 4-year degree. So I didn't want to have any black marks on my record book, let's put it that way.
If you had reported what you saw to your commanding officer, what do you think would have happened?
They probably would have sent me for some type of psychiatric evaluation.
And that pretty much would have ended your military career, wouldn't it?
Well, I probably would have gotten out as a normal discharge because, as I indicated, I was close to getting out anyway, but I don't think it would have assisted me or helped me in any way of trying to go back in as an officer, in some kind of commissioning program. So some things are better left unsaid, Vic.
Especially something like that. Did you have any standing orders on how to handle an encounter with an unknown entity like that?
Well, not so much an unknown entity, but you do have your general orders when you're on guard duty. And by Marine Corps standards or protocol, I probably should have mentioned it or reported it. But again, I think discretion is the better part of valor. And myself and the other individual that was with me decided it was probably better just to keep quiet about it.
Well, like I told you before, I really don't blame you for doing that. Did you refuse any assignments after having that encounter?
No, I did not.
Yeah, I can't see that going over all that well. I don't care what your reason is.
Well, you never want to refuse a direct order because that can create some real issues for your career as well as any future endeavors you may wish to have in the military.
Yeah, I didn't think that would be a wise move. Had you heard the term Dogman before you had that encounter?
No, actually, Vic, the first time I heard that term was listening to your show, probably going back about 4 or 5 months.
If it was that recent when you heard the term for the first time, What can you tell us about the feeling you had once you started finding out about all these other people who had the same kind of experience that you had years ago?
Well, here's the thing. The closest thing that I could describe to what I saw would be a Sasquatch. And even though it didn't look like the classic Sasquatch as far as the head, but I kind of feel vindicated because now, listening to these other descriptions, it certainly appears that what I saw was a Dogman and not a Sasquatch, and certainly not a large bear.
Yeah, sure doesn't sound like it was a Sasquatch or a bear. You talked about finding out about the term Dogman just about 5-6 months ago. How much research did you put into Dogman after you had that experience?
Well, I've listened to a number of your shows and a couple other ones that pale in comparison to Dogman Encounters, but there's not a whole lot of information out there. It's certainly not as much information as one could glean from researching Sasquatch or Bigfoot. But there's something that at least made me realize that what I saw was actually of the Dogman variety and not a Sasquatch.
Yeah, from the way you describe it, it sure sounds that way to me. Before you tell us about your encounter, Tom, please tell us about the area where you had that encounter.
Well, it was the wooded portion of Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. It's old-growth pine forest in the particular area where I was. We're talking trees that are 100 feet tall, possibly. Very thick growth, very thick trunks, a lot of brush and undergrowth. A canopy so that in the daytime you're not getting a lot of sunlight on the forest floor, and at night you're certainly not getting any moonlight. So it would be the perfect place for something like a Dogman to hide and not be detected.
People ask and wonder why Dogmen and Sasquatch seem to like to hang out on bases like that, but if you think about it, you're talking about huge areas of land where, for the most part, people just don't go. You're not allowed to hunt there. It's a perfect place for them.
Well, of course, and other than being out there for exercises or maneuvers, there's really no one wandering around there, like you said. So, of course, there's no campers, there's no hunters, no fishermen, no hikers. So it would be a perfect place for them to exist without being detected.
Oh, sure. All right, Tom, please tell us about your encounter. Give us every last detail that comes to mind.
In the spring of 1979, I was stationed at the Marine Corps base at Camp Lejeune, located in the eastern section of North Carolina. I was a sergeant assigned to a Headquarters Battalion Communications Company, 2nd Marine Division. In 1979, we were still at the height of the Cold War, with our principal adversary being the Soviet Union and the other Warsaw Pact nations, such as Poland, Hungary, Czechoslovakia. They were all under the umbrella of the Soviet Union. Of course, the U.S. had a substantial NATO presence in Western Europe, mainly in West Germany, but the potential for a Soviet armored division to roll through the Fulda Gap was always looming. Therefore, we would conduct various exercises to simulate a Soviet attack onto the plains and forests of Western Europe. Camp Lejeune was a good stand-in for Europe due to the forested areas and the fields and meadows. And preparations were made for one of these exercises, like I said, in the spring of 1979. I'm sure it had a name, but I don't recall it. Now, when we would set up for one of these exercises, the first things we would do is set up a command post, which would include your communications vans containing radio, teletype, telephone, and cryptology equipment to ensure communications between the combat units, support units, and the command post. Generators were set up and various lines were run. It normally took about a week or so to set up this communications equipment prior to the start of the exercise. And I mentioned the word cryptology, and that's not to be confused with cryptid. Cryptology is basically a way to ensure secure communications, converting the communications to gibberish so that the enemy doesn't intercept the actual messages. However, when it reaches the intended party, they have the proper communications and cryptology gear. It's decoded into a readable or understandable format. Since I was getting short meaning I was close to being discharged, I was assigned guard duty to stay watch over the equipment at night. During the daytime, various people were out there setting it up from, say, 7 in the morning until 5 in the afternoon. And then at night, myself and 6 other Marines would go out there, and we would basically guard the equipment. Now, it's funny, we were guarding some sensitive equipment, but I was the only one that was armed. I was armed with a Colt 45 semi-automatic revolver. And this was something that I would check out of the armory at approximately 4 in the afternoon, go out to the setup, and we would stay till approximately 7 in the morning when the day people came. And then I would go back to the armory, check it back in, and do this for the 4 or 5 days that we were involved in the setup. I mean, it's not like something I could carry with me around the base or anything like that. That's why it was always at the armory or on me at the particular site we were located. The other Marines were not armed. I was the only one that was armed, and I was considered Sergeant of the Guard. So what we would do was we'd get there at approximately 5 o'clock to 5:30 in the afternoon. It's still daylight. I think it probably would have gotten dark at 7:30 at that time of year, just before summer started and the longer days. And I would have a clipboard, and I would take somebody with me, and we'd walk around to the various areas and check off that everything was secure. The vans were locked, no signs of tampering, everything seemed secure. And it was probably generally what we did, and we would do the rounds every couple hours, and this would go on all night long. And normally the way I did it is I would have a different Marine every 2 hours do the walk around with me, and the other guys could sleep. During the time in between each guard round, or whatever you want to call it, we would cook hot dogs over a fire. We had a large bonfire, which we made with dead wood that was laying around. We'd chop some trees that were already dead, and we'd drag it over there and make a pretty good-sized bonfire. And we would make hot dogs and marshmallows, things like that, and eat them and tell the usual stories Marines tell, which is probably not fit for family consumption tonight. So what was funny, though, is that a number of bears, these were black bears, would gather around the fire, probably within 5 feet of us. We would be in a semicircle, and the bears would be around us in kind of a semicircle, and there would probably be up to 10, 12 bears, maybe double our number, and they would sit there, and you could have a 3 or 4 foot long stick with a piece of marshmallow or a piece of hot dog on it, and turn around and hold it out to the bear, and the bear would eat it off the stick. And these were mother bears with cubs. They were male bears, and there was no aggression. They were fine. It was just funny that everybody just sat there quietly, and it was kind of a weird sight. And now in retrospect, it's just bizarre. But at the time, it just didn't seem that way because it just seemed like so natural. So I believe on the 4th night we were there, which probably would have been a Thursday, it's approximately 10:30 at night now. It's pitch black, and I'm assuming that there was not a full moon, but even if there was, it probably wouldn't have illuminated too much of the ground. Myself and another Marine who was from Hawaii, was a Samoan, a Lance Corporal, which was an E3, were making our rounds. Now, you have to understand, I still have the pistol. It's in a shoulder holster, actually, not on my hip. And I've got a clipboard, and every time we would go to a different van, I would check it off. He's carrying a large flashlight, and really the only lights we had were the flashlights that we had and the fire, the bonfire. Now, as we were making our rounds, there was one other Marine that was still up. We were sleeping in large tents, and he was sitting by the fire, and I don't recall any of the bears being around at this time. It was fairly quiet, no sign of any other animals. We were probably, maybe 100 feet from the tent and the fire and the other Marine. And we heard, or I assume we both heard it because I heard it, a snarl or a growl directly in front of me, but in a thicket with a very, very large pine tree. So it's just pitch black. And I said to the other Marine, I said, "Shine your light there. What is that?" Something to that effect. And he shined his light on this thicket, and all I can tell you, Vic, is that what we saw defies imagination. It was, I'm 6'3", he was over 6 foot. We're looking up at this, whatever this was, which I'm going to call a Dogman because that would be the only way I could describe it. And we're 15, 20 feet away looking up at this. Now, if it was a bear or if it was pretty much anything else, it would have been at eye level. We were looking up, I would say, estimating its height, over 7 feet. That would probably be a conservative estimate or guesstimate. It could have been closer to 7.5 feet. Black, snout, large ears, erect, and one, I'm going to call it an arm, for want of a better term, hanging down, and the other arm kind of bent with large claws. And I guess the body would be best described as like the Sasquatch, classic Sasquatch type body, but certainly not the head or the ears. This all happened within a span of a second and a half. I mean, I think we both let out a yell. We ran into each other, dropped the clipboard, dropped the flashlight. The flashlight was still partially illuminating the area where this creature was. I remember grabbing the other Marine and turning him around. I'm to his left, he's to my right. I turned him around bodily and I'm yelling, "Go, go, go." And we're just start running through the woods, banging into trees, tripping over roots, what have you. Out of the corner of my left eye, as I'm looking, I see the Marine sitting by the fire jumped up and grabbed the axe. So whatever kind of scream or yell we did, it scared him. Now, I'm going to assume that whatever we saw, the Dogman went to, which would have been our left, his right, because he did not cross in front of where the light was still illuminating towards the fire, kind of towards where he was, and the Marine. So the other Marine would have seen it if he would have went in the same direction as us. It obviously went in the opposite direction. So after we kind of collected our thoughts and our hearts stopped beating out of our chest, we went back to the campsite or the tent and picked up another couple flashlights and went back out again and retrieved our flashlight and the clipboard. And I possibly may have had the 45 drawn, and I don't really recall if I did or not. I may have had it out. I know that I did not have a round in the chamber because I was not allowed to have a round in the chamber. I just had the 6 or 7 rounds in the clip. And as I keep thinking more about this it's been a while, it's a possibility I did have the pistol out and drawn. To make a long story short, never saw anything else there. The guy at the fire said, "What did you guys see?" I think I said it was just a big bear. And as we talked privately, his exact words were, "What the heck was that? That was like the size of a Kodiak bear." I said, "Well, you obviously know there's no Kodiak bears here. The only thing are black bears, and that thing was no black bear. That thing was monstrous." And that's basically it. It was a very short encounter. It scared the heck out of me and scared the heck out of him. But we did agree if anybody ever asked us, it was a bear. No reason to go into any more detail about it because he had a couple more years left in the Marine Corps. I was short, and we just figured leaving well enough alone was the way to do it. And that's basically it, Vic.
I know it was dark where you saw it, but did you get a chance to see what its legs looked like?
Never saw the legs, or if I did, I don't recall. And I know that I've heard other callers talk about the classic dog-type legs or muscular-type dog legs, and I don't recall that. I may not have seen it below the knees, but to me it was more of that, like I said, more of a classic Sasquatch look, like just a big, hairy man look. That would be the best way to describe it. I did not notice, and I'm not to say that they weren't like that. I just don't recall that. I just recall more of the upper body probably from mid-thigh up to the head.
If you had to describe its head study, do you think its head looked more like a dog's head or more like a baboon's head?
More like a dog's head, definitely. Because a baboon's got kind of a weirder, different type of snout. This was more pointed, more like a dog. And it was more like a dog, definitely, because a baboon is different facial features or different cranial features.
Yeah, sounds like it just might have been a canine type. Let me ask you this, though. In your studies on the topic of dogmen, did you ever wind up seeing that picture of the Beast of 7 Chutes?
No, I haven't, Vic. I'm not familiar with that.
When you get a chance and you're on the computer next time, do me a favor, look up the Beast of 7 Chutes. After you have a chance to take a look at that creature, I want you to let me know how that compared to what you saw that night.
Okay. I'll make a note of that.
Yeah, if you can, take a look at that photo and get back with me to let me know. I'd love to hear what you had to say.
Sure.
That'd be great. How well could you tell what color it was?
It was direct illumination, and we were close, and it was black as night, which is probably why, even though it was very dark in the area, we didn't even know anything was there because it was blended right in with the black background. It was as black as midnight.
You know how it is, Tom. Sometimes because of the flashlight you're using or other factors, because of the light that's hitting something like that, you can have a situation where something that's actually black might appear brown. So I was just wondering how good of an idea you had on its color. That's why I asked you about that. But I don't doubt you. It sounds like you had a really good look at it. And if you think it was blacker than black, I believe you.
Even though it was a short second and a half at most, it was enough to take in a lot. And I stand behind the fact that it was black. I know a Kodiak bear, for instance, is brown, but I think when the other Marine made that analogy, I think he meant more from size than description as far as the fur or the color.
Oh, sure. No, that makes good sense. Please tell us more about those claws that you saw. Can you describe them more thoroughly?
Very long, I would say the length of my fingers, which I'm a 6'3" guy, so I have pretty large hands, 4 inches, 5 inches long, maybe. Well, maybe not my fingers aren't that long, but I would say that the claws are probably 4 or 5 inches long.
Ooh.
And black.
Were the claws curved somewhat like a black bear's, or were they more straight like a grizzly bear's?
I would say they were somewhere in between.
Okay, I see. From how you related what happened, it sounds to me like you never saw that Dogman move from the spot where you saw it initially. Is that true?
No. The light, once we dropped it, it partially illuminated, but it was pointed more towards the fire where the other Marine was sitting. That wasn't involved in this. And that's why I'm positive it went to its right instead of our right, because it would have crossed in front of that illumination because he was looking at us as we're running. I mean, this all happens in a matter of seconds, obviously, or tenths of a second, whatever. But when I say he, I see the other Marine, so he would have had to have seen that cross in that light, so it obviously went in the opposite direction.
That makes sense. Besides you and the Marine who was with you that night, did you find out later that other Marines saw that Dogman too?
No, I don't recall anybody ever speaking about that, and obviously if they had, I would have recalled it. That's not to say that they didn't, it's just that nobody talked about it.
When that Dogman was standing there looking at you, did it ever give any indications it was thinking about becoming aggressive towards you?
Other than the initial snarl or growl, which is why we put the light on it, no. It may even have been a situation that we startled it as much as it startled us. And obviously, if it was super aggressive or wanted us, it could have had us. I mean, it was close enough, and from what I understand about the way these things can jump and how quick they are, he'd have been on us in a second or less. I wouldn't even have been able to break leather with the pistol. He would have been on me. That would have been all she wrote. And plus, there wasn't even a round in the chamber, so would just add to the agony.
Yeah, that doesn't help. I guess you could have tried to pistol whip him, but that probably wouldn't have gotten you that far.
And I'll tell you, Vic, the pistol was the last thing on my mind. I didn't even think about it as all this was happening until we kind of regrouped and went back to the campsite there. So pistol wasn't even an issue in my mind. And I didn't even think about it.
Well, that doesn't make you any different than a lot of eyewitnesses who have firearms or cameras. That's the last thing on their mind, so that's why they don't shoot, that's why they don't try to take a picture. Do you have any idea what it was doing there?
It could have been coming around for food. It could have just been investigating what the bears were investigating. It could have heard us. It could have been curious, any number of things. We could have been in its territory. It possibly had young, who knows? I mean, any number of things, Vic, like actually any other animal that would come investigate when people were encroaching on its territory.
Yeah, it does sound like it's one of those who knows type situations. Were there any strange scents when all this was going on?
I don't recall anything out of the ordinary. No, I don't, Vic.
How about its fur? How would you describe it?
Thick and coarse would probably be the best way to describe it, and from what I could see in that short time I saw it, I couldn't see any muscle definition or anything like that, so it was fairly thick all over the body. The least amount of fur would have been on the head, and of course in the paws or claws or whatever you want to call them didn't have quite as much fur. And again, like I said, this took place in a second and a half, so I wish I had a better description, but that's probably the best I can give you.
Oh no, that's fine. Under the circumstances, I totally understand. I was going to ask you if you noticed any matting in the fur, but with that quick glance that you got, I don't think you would have noticed that.
No, I couldn't tell you that, if there was any matting.
Oh, that's understandable. Before you saw that Dogman, did you notice a lack of ambient noise in the area?
I don't recall anything out of the ordinary as far as not hearing crickets or anything, any forest sounds. I think it was fairly normal. But again, we're talking almost, 28 years ago, so it could have possibly happened. I just don't recall that feature.
Oh, that's no problem. It has been a long time. Because you had that encounter, has your belief in the existence of Sasquatch been changed?
I would have to say, Vic, that I was a skeptic, but I think a lot about people who report these incidences, and I know there's always crackpots and people who want attention, but some of these people, particularly when you have law enforcement officers or seemingly normal people, and they swear that they saw something, you tend to start to want to believe this. And I guess the skeptic in me was, well, how come they've never recovered a body? Well, maybe they have recovered bodies, we just don't know about it. I don't know. But yeah, I think there's something out there. I think there's things out there that the government may know about that they don't want the rest of us to know about. And I think there's a lot of mysteries that are out there. Hopefully one day those mysteries will be solved and the truth will come out.
Considering your time in the military, I think you'd be the last person I would need to tell that if the military came into possession of a body of a Dogman, you know full well that that's not something that would be broadcast to the public.
No, they try to make a weapon out of it. I mean, that's what they do, right?
Yeah, that'd make one heck of a weapon, too.
There you go.
Has there ever been a time after your encounter when you thought another Dogman might have been near?
No, but I've been hunting, or I used to be a hunter. I used to hunt waterfowl, feral hog, wild turkey, deer years ago in Mississippi and Florida. I don't do that anymore, but I can't say that I ever had any type of possible encounter after that or suspected there was anything else out there. I mean, I've seen bears out there before, and I knew it was a bear. And I went the other direction because they probably weren't going to be quite as friendly as the bears you ran to in North Carolina. But no, I can't say that I've had any type of encounters since my original or initial or only encounter.
Well, that's good. Since that Dogman you saw didn't lash out at you when it could have easily done that, do you think Dogmen aren't quite as dangerous as they're made out to be?
Well, Vic, just because you see a dangerous wild animal out in the woods, whether it be a cougar or a panther or a bear, elk, a wild hog, it doesn't attack you doesn't mean it's a gentle creature or it's tame or it's not dangerous. It's just the one time it didn't do something aggressive. So I'm going to go with it's probably an aggressive creature and it's something you don't mess around with.
That's a really good point and a good way to look at it. How close is the nearest woods to where you live now?
Very, very close. Within half a mile.
That is close. It sounds to me like you're dealing with your encounter really well, but were there any unexpected effects your encounter had on you?
Well, I think I had some nightmares or bad dreams for a short time afterwards, and I used to like to camp, and I did continue to hunt, but I liked to camp, and I used to like to hike, but I don't think I ever entered the woods again without a weapon, whether it be a long rifle or a shotgun for hunting. I just not something I would do again, and frankly, if I was going to camp out, which I don't think I've even done, but if I was going to camp out, it would be in a cabin with running water and an indoor plumbing as opposed to going out to an outhouse. I'm not wandering around out in the woods without some type of weapon.
Well, I can't say I'll blame you. Now that you know they're out there, it definitely changes things. What did your nightmares consist of?
Well, being chased by something like this and running and trying to lose it, and it's still there, and it's on all fours, and then it's running bipedal, and then it's all fours and trying to escape this thing and not being able to escape it.
Because of those nightmares, knowing that they'd be waiting on you, did you ever suffer through insomnia for a short while after that encounter?
Well, I mean, if a nightmare would wake me up, it was difficult to get back to sleep because you'd think about this incident. And eventually, Vic, I got to tell you, I just kind of buried it in my subconscious. I just kind of put it away and moved on with life.
Well, a lot of eyewitnesses bury it like that. Long as it worked for you, that's good, but as you know now, you eventually have to deal with it.
That's for sure.
And I'm glad you did, too. Have you done anything special to try and help yourself get over that experience?
Well, like I said, I kind of buried it. I was out of the Marine Corps in July of '79. I went to college and did all the college type things and had fun, and I just kind of buried that thing so deep down that I never really spoke about it. And I have told the story to other people, but when I've told the story, it was just a large bear. And I never went into any other detail, it being a possible Sasquatch or something else, or a Dogman, obviously. And I just kind of figured a big bear was a good way to tell the story. It's kind of a humorous story to other people, especially when they found out I had a weapon and I didn't even think about using it and ran into the other guy, kind of like Abbott and Costello or the Three Stooges or something. And so I got some laughs about it, but I was never going to go tell the real story.
Yeah, if you would have revealed that it was a Dogman instead of a bear, I know you would have gotten a totally different response, that's for sure.
That's for sure, and I've actually told family members, and they looked at me like, really? Come on, you can do better than that. And I told my boss here at the law office, and he kind of just changed the subject. I guess he just didn't want to embarrass me. So that's basically, it's not something that I share with anybody other than this show here.
After having to experience such a horrible thing as what you went through that night, it's such a shame you have to deal with responses like that when you reach out for help. That's horrible.
That's why I think that there's more incidences of UFO sightings by pilots who don't report it for obvious reasons, or maybe law enforcement individuals who don't report either a UFO or a Dogman or a Sasquatch encounter because of what's going to happen. You'll be ridiculed, laughed at, what have you, considered to be nuts. So that's why I think there's a lot of valid sightings that are never, ever, ever related to anyone. And these people take these stories to the grave.
Well, for good reason, like the reasons you just mentioned.
Well, as you may remember, initially when I sent you my email about this, I indicated I didn't want to be on the show. Then after thinking about it and speaking with you, after you contacted me, I thought, what the heck, what have I got to lose? I'll tell it like it is, and if people believe it, they do, and if they don't, well, that's within their prerogative also.
I am glad you changed your mind and decided to come on. I'm not sure how closely you follow the show or not, Tom, but I actually narrated your encounter on an episode about maybe a month or so ago. It's kind of convenient that I'm mentioning that right now because if I don't, I know there are going to be a bunch of people scratching their heads wondering, you know what? This encounter sounds awfully familiar. Well, if it does sound familiar, that's why.
Well, tell me what number it is, because I've listened to a lot of the shows, so I want to listen to it.
You know what? I'm not exactly sure. I think it might have been around maybe 126, 128 in that area, I believe.
Well, I will listen to that tonight.
That sounds good. It might have been in Dogman Encounters Bedtime Stories too, but don't hold me to that because I don't know for sure. I think I did some narrations after that show even, and if I did, I think it's on that episode.
All right, that sounds like a winner. I'm definitely going to listen. I'm going to check for it.
Sounds good. How long was it after you had that encounter before you feel you're able to function somewhat normally again?
Oh, I would say within a few days. Once the exercise started, I was back in main side, which was the main part of the base. We were working 12-hour shifts because they split the company in half. Half were out in the field working 12-hour shifts. Half of us were at main side doing 12-hour shifts. And you're so busy because you're working 12 on, 12 off that you just kind of put everything aside and do your job.
Well, I'm glad you're able to deal with it so well. Like I said before, that's good to hear. How much trouble did you have going into the woods alone after having that experience?
I never really went back in the woods unless I was hunting, and I had a firearm, whether it be a Remington 1100 shotgun or a 30-06 or something of that ilk. I just never went out without some kind of firearm, and I don't know if it was a subconscious defense that I did, And I wasn't even a big-time hunter. Let me put it this way, Vic. I'd go out there more to be out in the woods. I really wasn't that interested in shooting the animals. I just like to be out there in the woods, but I kind of felt, I guess, deep down inside that I should probably have a firearm for some type of protection.
Yeah, you're not the only person who goes out into the woods for that reason. Not to shoot anything, but just to enjoy the woods. And you did mention earlier about the fact that you did go out hunting, but there are a lot of eyewitnesses who head out into the woods with a rifle, but they don't feel any sort of protection from that rifle, and for good reason, too. They still are really anxious about being out there, so I wondered, as far as you went, how much trouble, how much anxiety you still had when you went out alone like that, even with that hunting rifle or a shotgun.
Well, I haven't been out there in years, Vic, with children and marriage and work and all that, so I don't have the free time I used to have. But I think if I was to go back out again, I'd still be armed. I'd obviously go get a hunting license just so I'm covered in that respect, but I would be armed, but I wouldn't probably shoot anything. But just to make myself feel better, I'd probably have some type of firearm on me.
Well, now that you know they're out there, I can't say I blame you. But even if you didn't have to worry about dogmen being out there, I still think it's a good idea to have some kind of a weapon like that on you.
Well, I mean, there's any number of things out there. You have to worry about snakes. You worry about hog. They'll come after you. You never know. So it's just better to be safe than sorry.
Oh, I agree. Yeah, it's a good idea. Have you ever tried talking friends or family out of going into the woods because of your experience?
No, but I don't really want to relate what I saw because then it gets into a whole big thing about trying to tell my story. I've never really tried to talk anybody out of going in the woods, but normally when they do, and my family's not a big bunch of hunters, but everybody owns weapons, firearms. So I guess normally if they were to go out there, they probably would be armed.
Well, there are a lot of eyewitnesses who, without telling about what they actually saw, they'll still try to talk family and friends out of going out into the woods in a roundabout way because of what they know now that's out there.
Well, you're probably right in that respect, Vic, but I just kind of figured I didn't want to have to explain myself to anybody. They're grown-ups, and I guess they can decide how they wish to proceed. And again, like I said, normally everybody does own weapons, but we're not a big-time hunting family. So I would assume that normally if they did go out there, they probably would be armed just basically for coyotes or for snakes or for maybe, hog or something like that, just to be safe from those animals.
Yeah, anything can happen out there, so it's good to be prepared. Have you told your wife about your experience? You said that you haven't really shared it with most of the family, but when it comes to your wife, did you share it with her?
Yes, she laughed. She doesn't believe it. She just thinks I saw a big bear. I'm not going to argue with her. So whatever.
Wow.
Yeah, a world record bear. A world record bear.
Yeah, I'd say so. Yeah, that would be a Boone and Crockett black bear, no doubt about that.
That's for sure.
Yeah, they don't grow 'em that big. You used to spend time in Taylor, Mississippi years ago. What kinds of things did you do there?
As you know, Vic, I attended and graduated from the University of Mississippi, which is in northern Mississippi, about an hour south of Memphis, and close to Taylor, Mississippi, probably 15, 20 minutes away. We used to go to a country kitchen type place called Ruth and Jimmy's there to eat on occasion. And frankly, Taylor, Mississippi is in the middle of nowhere. A lot of two-lane roads back there. It's a heavily forested region. Though I did hunt in Mississippi, and I may have even hunted in that area, I don't recall anything strange or out of the ordinary. They have a great deer population there, and I think that's normally what we hunted was white-tailed deer.
Yeah, well, from the way you described that area, sounds like it'd be a really good habitat for dogmen, and as I'm sure you realize, a lot of people have claimed to have had encounters with dogmen there, but since you spent a fair amount of time there, what are your thoughts on the possibility that dogmen actually are in that area, considering your experiences there?
Well, I mean, in retrospect, it is a very heavily forested area. I mean, it's thick, old-growth woods there. And I know that probably at one time they might have had some logging there and things of that nature. It wouldn't surprise me due to the nature of the terrain that something like that could exist. I mean, if you were to go hunting there, it's some very, very thick woods. I mean, and it's not a real hospitable place for someone to be wandering around. So I could see something lurking around out there and not being detected, or if they were detected, being able to run off and hide. I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility at all.
Well, sounds like the perfect place for them to live, so I wouldn't be all that surprised. Now that it's been 30 years since you had that encounter, how well are you dealing with your encounter? Are you in as good of a place as it sounds like you are?
Well, I basically put it behind, and it's nice to be able to talk to you about this because this was something that I just wasn't going to relate to anybody. But for the fact that I've heard your show on a number of occasions and spoken with you, it made it a lot easier. And it is kind of a weight off my chest, I guess, to talk about it to somebody who's not going to ridicule me or laugh at me or whatever.
Well, like I said earlier to you, it sounds to me like you're in a really good place now, but I am glad that you came on the show and talked about this.
Well, I appreciate you having me on the show, Vic. It was an honor being on the show and a pleasure speaking with you.
Oh, it's been great having you on. Before we get out of here, do you have any closing comments you'd like to share?
Well, I'd just like to say to the non-believers that there is something out there, whether you believe it or not. And I was probably a non-believer till I was 22 years old when this occurred. There's stuff out there we don't know about, and you might want to take stock in the fact that there's a lot of people who are reputable people who aren't nuts, crackpots, storytellers or whatever that have had experiences, and not everybody's a liar. Not everybody's trying to make an economic gain from this. There's something out there, and just be aware of that.
That's well said. Yeah, there are a lot of people out there who've had experiences with these things who never asked to have these experiences. It's just something that happened.
Well, I agree with you.
Yeah, it really is unfortunate. Well, thanks again so much for your time, Tom. Thank you so much for coming on the show and talking about that experience with us. I really do appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Vic.
Oh, it's been great talking with you. Have a great night, okay?
Thank you, Vic. You too. Bye.
Bye.